We can start now, sir.
Okay.
All right.
We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Watershed Board of Directors meeting for December 10th, 2020. And I'm going to pass the baton to President Gibson for a little introductory remarks about our new member.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Excuse me, on behalf of the whole board, I want to welcome Monty Schmidt to our board. We're back to 5, which is where we want to be. And want to thank him for the value added that he's bringing to our board. 25 years of experience in water management and a senior water project manager for the Nature Conservancy. So very big thank you for your willingness to serve, and an equally big thank you to your family for their willingness to let you have the time to serve. So it's good to be back with 5.
Thank you so much. It's really it is an honor and a privilege to be here and getting here as you've all experienced. It takes a lot of support from a lot of people, and all of you were very helpful and supportive. And so really appreciate it. And it's exciting to be here and looking forward to rolling up my sleeves, putting my shoulder to the wheel and doing what I can to help out.
Good.
Okay. So and welcome from me to Monty, and I'm sure everybody else on the board. So let's get down to business. First order of business is to adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Move approval.
We have a second anywhere?
Second.
There you go.
Sorry.
Okay. Let's have a roll call, please.
Sure. Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and and Chair Bragman.
Aye. Very good. Okay. The next item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting, Watershed meeting from September 17th. Any corrections or comments about the minutes from anybody? Is there a motion to adopt?
I'll move approval to adopt the minutes.
Second.
Okay, could we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Bragman.
Aye.
Also,
Go ahead.
Did we have any public comments, Terry?
it looks like we do. Laura Cheriton, let me allow her to speak. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you about continuing violations of rules regarding mountain bikes and electric bikes. A massive number of electric bikes are seen on the old railroad grade. About maybe a quarter of the bikes on Saturday that I saw while I was hiking were electric bikes. There's also an enormous number of speeding mountain bikers. They do not slow down. On Saturday, I was walking on the Vernadunchi Trail, and a mountain biker came in over a little bridge around a blind curve and hit my dog. He's not, no bikes, it's that state parks, but then he went down the Tamalpa Trail at full speed, and I have a witness. If anyone was coming up the Tamalpa, he could have easily injured them, if not killed them, at the speed he was going. Most of the people using the mountain bikes and violating are men. It is a male-dominated sport. The other issue I have is several times in the last few months, mountain bikers have been coming full speed down the hogback, which is forbidden for bikes. And then they've been coming off the side hills and taking a lot of air. Incredibly dangerous. I don't feel safe anymore. And this is something that I've been doing for 45 years. And I don't think that I should have to give up my safety in order for other people to have their recreation. So that's a real problem. I hope you guys can start to look at this really seriously to do something about it. I've even talked to the state park rangers, and they said that there's too many people on the mountain. So when I've talked about these mountain bike issues, thank you.
Thank you. We have a next speaker, Larry Menekes. Larry, I think you can speak.
Unmute.
There I am. Okay. Laura, I couldn't agree with her more. I wasn't going to really speak to that issue. It's changing out there. I think Larry Bragman, who's out there regularly, sees it as well. There's a lot more evening. A lot of those evening people tend to have these strong lights, and they tend to be e-bikers. So there is a group that always has been coming out of Fairfax for years on Wednesday and Thursday evenings. That's different, but there is absolutely more use than we've ever seen, even in the summertime. So I'm seeing more use on a Friday afternoon than I was in November and December than I would see in as I said, in the summer. But what I wanted to address is, first of all, Monty, congratulations and welcome. That's number one. Number two, I like the new website. However, notifications have stopped going out, so I had to rejoin to get notifications. And I don't know how many people asked for notifications. It might just be a very small number of us. That was sort of an inconvenience. But what I did look for is, where will people go? And if they have a complaint, is it going to be easier now to find that form? And I can't find it at all. It's not under Rangers. It's not under Contact Us. It's not under Watershed. And I'd strongly recommend having it in two places, under Contact Us and directly under Watershed. File A, however you want to say the words to it, there would be my suggestion. And with that, those are my comments. Thank you so much, board.
Thank you. We have
Thank
no
you,
more
Larry.
speakers.
No more speakers?
No more speakers.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is the one-TAM work plan for 2021.
Yeah, good afternoon, directors. Amazingly, this is our 8th year of approving a work plan for the coming season since one-TAM was initiated. But I'm going to pass it on to Sean, who's going to go through the work plan for next year and an overview of the accomplishments from the last year.
All right. Good afternoon, Watershed Committee members. Sean Horn, Watershed Resource Manager. We also have Sue Gardner from the Golden Gate National Park Conservancy here, who's going to co-present this item with me. But to start it out, I'm going to say that this is a recommendation for the Watershed Committee to review and refer to the Board of Directors with a recommendation to approve the one-TAM 2021 annual work plan. In 2014, Mount Tam Forest Land Management Agencies formed the Mount Tam Lands Collaborative, now called one-TAM. So each year, one-TAM develops an annual work plan that is structured around the areas of focus of the one-TAM strategic plan. So you'll recall in March 5th of 2019 at the Board of Directors meeting, we presented the one-TAM next 5 years going farther together, which was the strategic plan. And this work plan has been developed based off of the initiatives within that strategic plan. So with that, I'm going to move into a presentation that we've put together for you to help you review this item today. So give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Everybody see that all right?
Yeah.
All right. So going into the one-TAM annual work plan review, the outline for this presentation is we're going to highlight the annual report, which is attachment 2 to the staff report. And then we're going to go into detail on the annual work plan. The annual work plan describes activities that in 2021 will be carried out to deepen and expand the efforts of the one-TAM partnership and to improve the health of the mountain, enrich our users and visitors experience, and cultivate and educate a new generation of stewards. With that, we'll review the programs and projects associated with this next year, the landscape scale science and management, as well as go over the communications, partnerships, and philanthropy efforts that these 5 agencies are working together on. So very briefly, the OneTAM annual report really highlights a number of primary initiatives that were brought forward during the 2019-2020 period. One of those that really benefited the district was the Forest Health Strategy. This was something that was brought forward through a grant proposal to the Coastal Conservancy, and OneTAM was awarded $725,000 to start working on a forest health strategy. This also brought some funds to the district to help implement some of our forest resiliency work as we were scaling that up under the BIFIP. So they helped us with our implementation of the Potrero Meadows work this last year. And that was a pilot project to that forest health strategy. And now they're working with all the land management agencies through that planning process to review and evaluate the different forests that we have on our public lands, to consider some of the restorative treatments that we can carry out to make a more resilient forest system, as well as address some of the fuel loads that have built up in those forest types over the years. So that's a really important initiative that's highlighted in this OneTAM annual report. Another one that was really beneficial this year and had some positive products coming out of it was the early detection rapid response. This is one of the programs that helps us identify and manage some of the invasive plants on the watershed lands. And this last year, the early detection rapid response program developed a report called Early Detection Beyond Boundaries, which really outlined the different survey techniques that are carried out, the management treatments that are implemented, and how this benefits individual land management agencies in their stewardship objectives and efforts. There was also a number of things highlighted in this annual report relating to the vegetation map, some of the community science elements, and empowering some of our youth in stewardship. And I'm going to leave those for as we talk through our annual report or our annual plan for the year, because those are kind of discussed in more detail in that annual work plan as well. Moving on, I'm going to bring Sue into this and allow her to introduce the OneTAM annual plan.
Thanks, Sean. Perhaps I'll introduce myself to you all first. So thank you for having me here today. I am Sue Gardner, and I'm Director of Stewardship and Conservation Science for the Parks Conservancy. And I interface a lot with OneTAM, particularly the program side of the house, but pretty much the overarching framework as well. By the way, I grew up in Mill Valley, Blythedale Canyon. I think that is Division 4. And I spent a lot of time as a kid tromping around in MMWD land. So all of what you're doing is dear to my heart. Okay, so what I want to do is give you a quick little overview of the just high level elements of the work plan. But one of the things I wanted to talk about first, because it's so ever present right now, is how the pandemic has affected everything we've done, both last year and this year. So if I was going to pull a thread that I'm going to tap on, it's really about adaptability and resiliency, and how we have adapted our projects and our programs and our way of looking, and how in 2020, and how we'll continue on that theme in 2021. And it's something I think we're pretty proud of, because we have been able to adjust, and I'll go through that a little bit as we go through. Sean? Next, yeah. So one of the first ones I wanted to give you a little update on is we did in the past year hire a new program manager to work with trails. His name is Will Mateo. And he's been working alongside Jim Fauché and Daryl Nicholson from MMWD. And they're looking to catalog the high needs trails that would be good volunteer projects moving forward. So that's happening. They're also sharing amongst all the agencies, they're all sharing best practices, and they're looking at how to organize kind of a mountain-wide core to take care of some of our trails. Next, Sean. In community science end of the house, so a BioBlitz is where you gather together a group of people, which we haven't quite been able to do the way we used to look and kind of catalog all the species in one area and get a pulse on how they're doing. But we've been able to adapt the program this year to do a lot of it virtually by teaching iNaturalist online and having individuals go out and do some cataloging. So there's been some adaptations to that. I was told yesterday that in 2021, we're looking at ramping up efforts around monarchs, California Pacific salamanders, and fungus. I also learned that in relationship to the monarchs, that MMWD has some of the best milkweed populations of all of our public lands. So nice little fact there. And then on the wildlife picture index, so we have a cameras array all over the mountain, not only on MMWD land, but on all the other agencies. Now, MMWD takes responsibility for checking all their wildlife cameras, but we do help them with some of the processing of that. So there's a good collaboration going on there. In 2021, they're looking for a whole new digital platform that's coming up. They're working on it with Conservation International, and it's going to use AI basically to go in and be artificial intelligence to be able to go in and read a lot of those pictures, because right now we're backlogged with millions of pictures and a volunteer pool that is going through and identifying it. So this will greatly reduce our work and allow us to get more data more quickly. So that is coming in 2021. Next. There's been a lot happening with youth, and if any of you have children, you probably know that this has been a rough go for them these days with the pandemic and trying to figure out how to navigate things. So just last month, we began a new collaborative program with all the agencies called the Rising Environmental Youth Leaders. So it's a school year program where there's 12 youth. We had 65 applications from schools all over Marin. We ended up with 12 youth, and they meet every Wednesday afternoon and all day on Saturday. Now, ideally, they were going to be meeting in person, but now they're meeting online. And what we do is we have themed weeks, and we bring in specialists from all of our agencies. So just I think the last round, the liaison from MMWD is Suzanne Whalen, your volunteer coordinator. She's been doing an amazing job. And she hosted the last theme week, which is on watershed and sea level rise. And then for our Link Summer High School program, we plan to host it next year. Last year, it was all virtual. We're prepared to do it virtually again in 2021, and we hope that we might actually be at a place where we can get the youth outside. But as you know, there's just a lot of uncertainty about where we're going to be at by that time. Okay. There's been a lot going on with community connections, and I actually want to thank MMWD for being kind of an inspiration to us to get back out there, recognizing that this is a time that individuals are needing parklands and open space more than they ever have. So OneTAM has teamed up with the MMWD Watershed ambassadors and the Slow and Say Hello folks. And they've been hosting online trainings to get people ready to go out and greet people, not only with the regular protocols, but how do you do it in an era of COVID? And they've had 34 shifts, 24 of those have been on MMWD lands, mostly at Lake Lagunitas. And they said they've reached over 1,000 visitors. And our liaison there again has been Suzanne Whalen. So props to her for that. The program's been temporarily, with shelter in place, it's been temporarily paused. I do believe that Suzanne is trying to figure out maybe how to do something small, but we're just back at kind of being very reduced at this stage of the game. John, back to you.
All right, and so the next section of the annual work plan is the project. The projects has been organized slightly differently this year in the plan, in that we really tried to hone in and focus on what the Conservancy would have the capacity to assist with, and carrying out some of the projects that the different land management agencies have prepared for this coming year. So where that's going to help and benefit the district is on the Azalea Hill Trail project. The Conservancy has been successful in getting some private donations that are supporting some of the signage on that project, and some of that signage is helping us to raise awareness about the objectives of the projects and the goals. And this is an example of one of the signs that we've developed with the Conservancy for that project. And then we've also developed construction signs that are out in the areas where we're actually implementing the work. There's also in the project section, the Bethune Marsh Adaptation Project, the Forest Health and Resiliency Effort, Roy's Redwood Restoration, and then the Redwood Creek Trail Realignment Project. The other one that's going to come to MMWD through this process is the Forest Health and Resiliency. Some planning around where we might be able to find additional funding to help us implement some of our resilient forest work and scale that up is occurring under this project. And then also some of the communication and outreach efforts to bring awareness to the importance of this work and how we're doing it is coming through the communications team at the Conservancy and One TAM initiative. Moving into landscape scale and science is the next section of this annual work plan, and it highlights vegetation management, long-term inventories, peak health, and forest health strategy, which is the larger study that we're doing with the other partners. Under early detection, rapid response, the Conservancy is continuing to help us with meet our biodiversity, fires and fuels, vegetation management targets in regards to invasive species management. That also links to this final item we have on today's agenda and one of the contractors we're bringing on. We'll speak more to that later. And then there's also some additional long-term monitoring inventories that are going to be occurring. As Sue mentioned, the monarch effort is underway. There's also the bat monitoring and pollinator species monitoring. We're also continuing with some of the vegetation mapping products that are coming out of that study that the district and other agencies help to fund. And then the big effort in this next year is going to be the peak health update. So the first peak health update came out in 2016, and they're in the process of updating that, looking at the different indicators or the different biological resources on the mountain, trying to identify the status of them through bringing all of the different partner agencies' data together and really summarizing that in one succinct report to give us an understanding of what the health of the mountain really looks like. So with that, we'll go to communications and philanthropy.
Thanks, Sean. So One TAM had hired, some of you perhaps met him, Bill Disbrow. He was helping us kind of serve as a communication hub between all of our different agencies. And he unfortunately left, but fortunately, we're looking to hire someone new in January who will continue to serve that position. In the meantime, the website and the social media is being held down by a variety of different staff. One element that was very successful in 2020, and maybe we ought to think about what it looks like in 2021, was when, and I think it's still up there, is with the COVID closure between the different agencies. It's been very confusing to people where they can go. And so there was a online map that was helping to direct people to places that were open and what the different restrictions were. One future opportunity I want to put out there is that we can tell from the data analytics that one of the places that people like to go and are looking for on our website is trails information. And so really thinking about how to do a little bit more of that online and help people to understand the trails, not just within one agency, but how they cross amongst all of our agencies. Also, the newsletter that goes out every month is a really good touch point. And I talked to Kaylee, who helps to write that, and she wanted me to let you know that there's lots more opportunities to profile special events from each of the agencies, including MMWD. So just to plant that seed there. I want to also thank Sean and others. We've been doing some webinars, and they've been very popular. And Sean helped on one that was on forest resiliency and was kind of our star speaker at one of those. So thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. And then in terms of philanthropy, we recently hired Catherine Jones. She goes by Kat. And she replaced Matt Leffert. Some of you might remember Matt. She worked at TPL for many years and also for the County of Marin. And she's already started a once a month group from individuals from all of the different agencies who get together and talk about where's our nexus for collaboration. Let's look at grants, legislation, bonds, lessons learned. Matt Seges is your liaison right now from MMWD, who sits on that. That's it for philanthropy. I think I wanted to end by saying while we're being called upon to be incredibly resilient and adaptable, we also move forward with much gratitude for MMWD and for all of our collaborative work together. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Sue. So just in closing, the recommendation here is for the Watershed Committee to review the annual work plan and recommend it to a biannual monthly board meeting for approval. But with that, we'll take any questions.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. I have a couple. Sean, where is Bothene Marsh?
Down near Mill Valley.
Okay. And
It's
then
the
the other,
marsh, the where
Okay.
you know where the bike route goes through. If you go to Tam Junction, and it's actually there's a bike path that actually they have to look at because as with sea level rise, it's not going to be there much longer. So that's part of the focus.
I
That-
see. Okay.
right.
And the other question I had was, are we reaching out up to Novato for the education link program?
Yeah, good question. Yes, Novato actually has had many students who have been involved with the Link program. I'm not exactly sure how many, but when we had the summer program, out of a group of about 20, I think we had 5 or more that were from Novato.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's a big community up there that has some needs, and I'm glad you're reaching out up there. So.
And we look as we put the word out. We'd welcome having you also help us spread the word to if you see areas that we're not reaching well. So thanks. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay. Thank you for doing it. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question, Larry. In Sean's presentation, he talked about some of our resilient forest grants, et cetera, that have come to us. And I've not focused on this before, but do we have grants that have been jointly applied for with the one TAM and not just MMWD? So,
Yeah. So Jack, we do a lot of work collaborating with the Conservancy on, multi-beneficial grant proposals that would bring funding to both organizations for work. And the Coastal Conservancy grant for 725 was an example of that. The Conservancy was really the lead on the application in the process, and it brought some funding to the district to help with the implementation of that Potrero Meadow Forestry. In past years, we've also applied for the CAL FIRE funding as a collective. And we're also, right now, they're working with some of the other land management agencies on a wildlife conservation board application for some of the monarch work that Sue mentioned. So there is a big effort to bring all the agencies together, and it makes us more competitive in that grant space.
Yeah, correct me if this is a wrong thought, but my sense of the granting world is that they, at all levels and from almost all of the grantors, they prefer and look for collaborations. So obviously that kind of a collaboration has to enhance the likelihood of being successful with your grant. So that's why I never focused on that before, but I have now. So that's a good thing. Okay.
Any public comment?
Yes, the first one I have is Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Mr.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
This is a comment and something that I would like to raise as a community issue for all of the organizations involved in one TAM. I just wonder if there's any long-term planning on a joint basis to deal with climate change and drought on Mount Tam. And another issue which I think is a joint issue is realignment of trails to avoid sensitive habitat. That should concern all of the agencies. And such things as common signage characteristics. So there's a lot of sort of long-term planning in those areas, and there are probably others. And I'm interested to understand how that's being addressed.
Good question.
Climate change. First of all, Roger, thank you so much for bringing those forward. Climate change is one of the main themes in our that emerged in our annual planning for the years ahead. Every single one of the agencies brought it forward as a theme. So it's front and center, and now we need to figure out how to make a lot of it actionable, but it is right there for us. Trail realignment, yes, that's one of the goals of the new trails manager, is to work with each of the agencies, and instead of working in silos, to try and work together to figure out some of that challenge. And on the common signage, I know that we've worked with state parks and to have common signage, but I actually am not as familiar with that one. Maybe Sean is a little bit more.
Yeah, all the agencies do have their individual branding around signage. However, as we continue to think about water recreation planning on the watershed, signage is something that we've been discussing. So having some coordination among signage might be something that we could think about and begin to pursue with. But there is, each agency does have kind of other, state parks and national parks. They're definitely using signage that's beyond just here locally. So they might have a harder time adapting to a common signage approach.
The next speaker we have is Laura Sheraton.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm concerned about how the projects get prioritized. The Dipsy Bridge in Redwood Creek project seems to have been elevated above some of the other issues that would have serious impacts on coho and steelhead and other aquatic species in Redwood Creek. And that being the Deer Park Fire Road, which is incredibly incised. I mean, there's some places where it's 3 and 4 feet deep and is wide, if not wider. And I'm just wondering if any work's been done on that, because that's been degrading for quite some time, and it will bring sediment and have a serious impact on salmonid success in Redwood Creek. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any more speakers.
Okay. Any other board comments,
Nope.
questions?
I have just a quick silly question. Where did that badger come from?
That was from the watershed. And I think the rangers way back when, I think it was a roadkill or something happened to it, and they actually taxidermied it, and it's something that we used out at our outreach events. And it's not surprising that you noticed, because that's actually what draws most of the attention during our watershed programs, and people want to know if they actually are on the watershed and where they are, and they're very curious about that little guy.
I wonder if he should be our mascot.
Yeah.
Right.
He did a pretty good taxidermy job if he was roadkill.
Yeah,
He doesn't look squished at all. Are there still badgers?
there are. Yes.
We've seen bobcats. Those are interesting. Look like giant kitty cats with no tails. But
Actually,
no badgers.
Suzanne told me the badgers are up on Rocky Ridge, up on that side of the watershed. That's.
They like the marijuana, maybe, huh?
I know I do, but I'm not sure. That was a joke.
They probably eat it. They probably eat it raw. They probably eat it raw,
Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, thanks a lot, you guys. I guess we'll see you at the board meeting.
So are we referring this then?
Yeah, I'll move a referral to the board.
Okay,
I'll second
excellent.
that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we going here? Next is the Azalea Hill update.
Yeah, great. So there's been some wonderful work that's been done this year on Azalea Hill. We're going to update you on what's going on, and then talk about mitigation monitoring, which is a requirement of our mitigated neg deck as part of the project. So that's an annual report in terms of mitigation. I'll let Sean take over again.
All right, so this is an informational item. You'll recall that on May 14, 2019, the District Board of Directors adopted the amendment to the Mount Tam Watershed Roads and Trails Management Plan and the restoration of Azalea Hill, the trail project itself. So as part of that adoption under CEQA, we also adopted a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, which allows us to document the mitigation measures that are implemented during the planning, implementation, and long-term monitoring stages. So that's what we're here to do on an annual basis, is to report out on that mitigation associated with this year's implementation phase. So attached to this staff report is the checklist of our mitigation requirements and all of the elements that were carried out during the pre-planning phase, as well as through the implementation stage. To walk you through this and provide a broader update on the project, we have a presentation. So I'm going to share my screen again and move into that presentation and touch on a couple of these things in more detail. So in this, we're going to very briefly review the environmental compliance that was conducted as part of this project, discuss phase 2 trail work, which was the focus of this year's work, and then talk about the installation of the Bullfrog Bridge or over Bontempe Creek. And the picture to the right is of Precision Crane working with our watershed maintenance staff to install this 80-foot steel truss bridge over Bontempe Creek. And then we'll also touch on the work plan for calendar year 2021 and 2022 as part of this project, so you can see what's on the horizon. Just to very briefly give an overview and introduction to the project. This is a sign that the OneTam has been assisting us with and is out in the areas where we're implementing the project to raise awareness about what's going on. The map on the left-hand side identifies 3 phases of this project. Currently, we're focused on phase 2, which is the yellow route, we call it the Fisherman's Route. And this segment is something that we're working on in collaboration with the California Conservation North Bay through a grant that we've received with them to implement. And our project sign is really about updating people on the status of the project and then really the goals of this project. So in regards to the environmental compliance that was carried out this last year for the implementation of phase 2, it was all started around our staff and contractor environmental compliance training, making sure that they understood the sensitive resources that were in the project area that we were trying to avoid during implementation. We did need to clear some vegetation in order to allow for our new alignment to be constructed. So we conducted nesting land bird surveys during the nesting season and avoided any active nests. We also needed to remove a few trees. So we conducted bat roosting habitat surveys to ensure that we didn't remove any habitat for bats. And then we also carried out western pond turtle and other wildlife and amphibian surveys in the trail corridor itself, and then also put in avoidance fencing to allow us to do that ground disturbing trail work. And this was, this trail surveys allow for us to make sure that there's no wildlife within the project area during implementation. In order for us to install the bridge over Bontempe Creek, we did have to remove a number of trees. Some of those trees had been impacted by sudden oak death and were dying or dead. However, we did have to mitigate for our tree removal activities. So we're actually currently in the process of planting a number of trees, willows, black oaks, valley oaks, Oregon white oaks, and California buckeye along what would be the northwestern riparian corridor of Bontempe Creek in that project area. And this is to mitigate for the tree removal that was associated with our bridge over Bontempe Creek. And then in association with the trail alignment, we worked with our staff to conduct rare plant surveys to identify some of the species that were in the trail corridor and come up with a route that could avoid these species. And so that was a real success of this phase of implementation. We were able to document and actually flag all of these species in the field and then come up with a trail alignment that would avoid them. So that reduced the need to do actual mitigation and restoration, but also created a more sustainable trail route over the long term. And so if we move in, just looking at a couple of pictures, you can see the photo on the bottom left shows that the existing trail that was being used as a social trail actually went through a population of hairy birdspeak. And we actually changed the alignment to that yellow route that goes around that oak tree to avoid that completely. And so as part of this new grade work, we'll be continuing to look for alignments that avoid some of these species that we're trying to preserve and enhance out on this project area. And then we'll also be looking to do passive restoration of these old social trails to allow for those species to expand. As part of that passive restoration, we are closing some of the social trails. So the picture to the right shows you that we've been installing some of the signs to show these areas as closed. All the trail work that we've been doing this year in phase 2 was funded through a grant that the California Conservation North Bay got through Prop 68. It was about $225,000, and that was funding the brushing work that they carried out to allow us to construct that trail alignment. They helped with the tread construction, so that's the surface of the trail, and then also helped us procure many of the materials that we'll be using next year to construct our stream crossings. So this year we also were able to, with generous support from the EMIG Trust and some of our community members who have contributed to the Mount Tam Watershed Fund, we're able to use $150,000 to construct the bridge over Bontempe Creek. This is just a photo of our crews out there digging and compacting what will be the foundation of that bridge, and then working with the geotech to do the necessary analysis before we construct that, the footings for the bridge. This is our watershed maintenance staff did all of this work out in the field. So you can see after we get the bridge footings poured and constructed here, and then we swung that bridge in, and it was delivered to the watershed in 2 pieces. And then we brought a crane in, precision crane, on the day of installation. Our crews worked with them to bolt this bridge together, and then they were able to swing it in one piece and place it in place. So it looks great out there. We're currently working on the decking. So it's going to be a redwood decking. This was at the end of last week, so you can see we made a little bit of progress, but this week we're about 3/4 of the way over it, and crews are out there today working on the rest of the installation of this decking. And this is some pretty hefty redwood decking on the order of 3.5 to 4 inches in thickness to allow for equestrian access. And you'll notice that this bridge is wide enough for our rangers to bring a UTV over in the case of an emergency to evac someone if they needed to. So that was one of the critical elements we were looking for in this bridge construction. So this is a really great project, and this is going to be kind of the entryway to this whole new trail system that we're constructing here. It's a great piece that we have a lot to be thankful for the EMIG Trust in supporting that. For this next work year, we have funds remaining with our grant through the California Conservation North Bay, and we're going to be focused on some of the crossings over some of these small drainages and streams that run through the project area. We have about 6 either bridges or crossings that have to be constructed, and then we have a number of rock crossings that will be implemented as part of this project as well. The difficulty of all of these crossings will be that these are remote locations, so all of the materials for these bridges will have to be hiked out to the sites, or we'll barge them in on the lake. And then the cement will actually have to be pumped out through a concrete pumper, or actually brought to each of those sites so we can do the small abutments. So we're currently in the process of refining our geotechnical work for those abutments, and we're looking to implement the trail crossings in this next summer or next work year. So phase 3, if we kind of move on, you've all heard that we were successful in being awarded a grant from the California Department of Parks and Recreation Roads and Trails program, which is funded through the Federal Department of Highway. And that's a federal funding source. So we're gonna have to be working through NEPA for this phase 3 section. We're gonna be spending 2021 really in a planning phase for this section of work. We're not going to be doing any implementation. We're really going to be focusing on updating our rare plant surveys along this route, carrying out a number of site surveys to evaluate our options for mitigation if we can't avoid certain species, and see what is feasible for this project route. And then really the big part of this project or this phase is this retaining wall that's up near the intersection of Bolinas Fairfax Road that we'll have to construct. And that's going to be the majority of what this grant of $700,000 will pay for, is the construction of a very large retaining wall to allow us to have this trail connection. So we'll be working with our geotech who's under contract to assist with that design of that retaining wall. And then we'll be doing some minor vegetation management along this trail route. We have a lot of Douglas fir encroaching into the trail. So in preparation for future years of implementation, that's one activity that could occur. And then we'll be continuing with our signage to close social trails and also just raise awareness around the project and the status of the project. So as I mentioned, the Conservancy has been helping us with some private donations that they received for trail signage on this project. And they helped us design this kiosk, which is going to be a temporary kiosk that we install at the Bontempe Creek Bridge crossing. So that new bridge we just installed right there will be a two-sided kiosk we install, and there's going to be a temporary sign that we put on there that'll be there for about 2 years. That's really designed to educate people about the different phases of the project, where they are in terms of funding and status as far as construction goes. And then we hope by the end of next year that phase 2 route will be opened as an out and back route. And then we'll be working through phase 3 through 22 and 23 on the implementation of those areas. So this is a nice sign that really, is meant to provide information about the project, but also the goals behind it as far as the ecological benefits of the work. And we're grateful to the Conservancy for having the graphic design support to help us with this work. So in summary, we've got 3 grants thus far for this project. We received the EMIG Trust and the Watershed funds in amount of $150,000. That supported the implementation of that bridge project that we looked at. We also received the California Conservation North Bay Prop 68 grant in the order of $225,000 for that phase 2. We'll be completed with that phase next year. And then we have the Recreational Trails Program, which is through the Federal Highway Administration, in the amount of $700,000 for that phase 3. The project elements that are underway or completed would be the bridge over Bontempe Creek. We've initiated the trail grade work in phase 2 with crossings planned for calendar year 2021. We're continuing with our social trail closures and signage. And to be clear, we haven't started to decommission those social trails yet. We've really been focusing on a passive restoration approach to date, where we just sign it as closed. In future years, we will be looking at doing some more active restoration and decommissioning of some of those social trails as well. We're continuing with our trail improvements on phase 1. So we've started working with the California Conservation Corps on some very minor improvements on the trail, the existing trail route that goes up and over Azalea Hill. That's phase 1. We did some switchbacks last year, and we'll be doing some additional trail improvements this year in that section. And then we're going to be initiating design and environmental work in that phase 3. So that's going to be a big effort for this next year, is really designing that retaining wall and working through NEPA with the California Department of Parks and Recreation as part of that grant program. So with that, I'll take any questions that the Watershed community members might have regarding the project or the mitigation that we've been working on.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sean.
Yeah.
No.
So, Sean, is the bridge, it sounds like it's going to be done in the next few weeks, the deck.
Yep, absolutely.
So is it going to be open?
Yeah, it'll be open because you can, as a hiker or equestrian, you'll be able to go over the bridge, hang a right, and go up on phase 1 over Azalea Hill to the parking lot or the top of Azalea Hill. So that route is currently still open. People are hiking it. And so that bridge will give access to that. And then we'll put a sign in the area where we're still constructing that fisherman's route, phase 2, as closed for the time being.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I love those prefab bridges. They're really
great.
How wide is that bridge?
Oh, it's about 6.5 feet, I believe.
Okay, you couldn't really tell that from the picture, but if you said you've got some heavy equipment going over it, it sounds like, so, yeah.
Just the only equipment that'll be UTVs or a quad would be able to go over it. So a ranger could use our UTVs to evac someone or a quad to patrol the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, progress for sure. Anybody else comments? Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have 2 speakers. The first one is Nona Davis.
Mute. Okay, hi, Sean, thanks. That was very thorough. I've heard some of that. I'm familiar with some of it, but this is a really very comprehensive overview of the whole project. Are you working into your schedule any trail hardening? Where does that fit? Because you're doing this in phases. So when will you harden the trail up and over, for example, which is coming first? How would you handle that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Nona. So the phase 1 up and over Azalea Hill, that is going to be something that we work on in more detail in later years. We're actually starting with that phase 2 and 3, so we're slightly out of order. So we're not doing a lot of work there. The trail in phase 2 will be the grade work is basically completed, and it'll be allowed to kind of season over this winter and not be used and harden. And then we'll come back in next year and continue to work on those crossings. But we won't be installing any overlay on any of these trail paths either.
Okay, so you're kind of letting them season in sequence.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker we have is Larry Minikis.
Sean, that's a great presentation and great work that you guys are doing there. And I just want to point out that yesterday I received an email from MCBC, and well, that was the title as well. That was quick. New bridge installed at Azalea Hill. It's been less than a month since we announced the major funding boost of Azalea Hill restoration project, and we're already seeing major progress, but it could get people to believe that something's opening very soon. And speaking as a mountain biker, we tend to be an impatient bunch. So tongue in cheek here. And I would suggest reaching out to MCBC to get that communication out to people as to sort of, they can see the timeline so they have a realistic idea of when they'll actually be able to bike and go on that thing, because it's sort of, I'm not saying it's misleading, but it could get people, the way they're riding right now, get people to believe we're really close to opening that trail. And that's my comment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I will just note that it was probably hard to see in this presentation, but the signed kiosks that the Conservancy has helped us design, those are going to be installed by an Eagle Scout team in the next couple of weeks here. And once those are installed, they actually do identify when the different sections of the trail will be open potentially. And so it does say that they're all under construction currently, and we'll update that sign periodically to provide that information to those different user groups.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sean. I was talking more about communications to MCBC so that they're clear to their membership, which is the major way people learn things. That's all I was saying. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good point, Larry. Thanks.
Thank you. We do not have any more speakers. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Mr. Roberts, did you want to speak? Okay, his hand's up. We have one more. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
With respect to Azalea Hill, particularly the trail going over the hill and down, when you get to the top, the views are probably the best that exist anywhere of the watershed for the water district. And I don't know what signage you're planning to put up there, but there ought to be some kind of signage that helps people orient themselves and what they're seeing and what we're trying to protect there and so on. The other aspect is a lot of the social trails lead from that point down to the trail below. And you're going to need to make sure that people realize those social trails are completely closed. And the sooner you do that, the better.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. I'll note that we have started installing trail closure signs up on that section in some of those social trails. And as part of the project, we will be having our rangers increase patrols on that section as we start to open it more officially. And then we haven't really identified a funding avenue quite yet for our improvements at the Azalea Hill parking lot. And that is where we intend to design a very resource-focused kiosk sign to raise awareness around what we're trying to achieve through this project. So we'll carry those comments forward, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Nona Davis. I think she already spoke, but if we're okay with her speaking.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Go ahead,
Yeah, thanks. One more thing to add about social trails. You may be aware that the highest point on Azalea Hill is off the trail. And it's a favorite spot. Go there, and if you can, we actually recommended that you formalize that off trail so that people could go to the highest point, come back, be satisfied, and continue on their way. So I'm not certain how you're going to handle that, but that's going to be a really hard social trail to close.
Right.
That's my comment.
Thank
Do
you.
with it what you will.
We have no further comments.
Could I ask one more question? And this may be in Carl's bailiwick. On that retaining wall up by Bolinas Road, that sounds like it's going to be enormous. And I don't know, I mean, have we mapped the final route of the trail? Because if it came out a little lower, you probably could have a smaller retaining wall. But
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead,
There,
Carl.
I can take a stab at that. It's probably, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen the design, but it's probably going to be 3 or 4 feet high, maybe a couple 100 feet long. And it's an extension of the existing old roadbed, the old Liberty Gulch roadbed that connects with a logical grade to Bolinas Fairfax Road. So there aren't really too many choices. And the need for the retaining wall is to get us across what is otherwise an unstable slope, cross slope.
Yeah.
And so when the trail hits Bolinas, are we going to have some kind of an area to allow people to kind of merge into the roadway?
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen where the existing social trail exits or connects with Bolinas Fairfax Road, but there's a fairly large pullout, and we have secured or made arrangements with the county for our trailhead being on or within their easement. So there will be room for users they won't dump out right into traffic.
Okay, good call.
Sounds like it might be time, guys, to think about a helicopter to bring in materials if you've got that kind of length to build.
It's right off the road. It's right off of Bolinas Fairfax Road. It's
okay.
It's super, it'll be close for any equipment needs or it'll probably be like a hillside drilling kind of rig, portable rigs you see on Sausalito hillsides for home reinforcements.
Sure. What about the one with the backpacking the materials in? Maybe I crossed my wires there.
That too. We may use our new bridge to access some of those sites, and we may barge some equipment in across the lake to the sites.
I don't think hiking it in is the best alternative from a cost standpoint, but we shall see.
Okay.
I have a general comment I want to make too, Larry, before we wrap up. So go ahead. I nothing about this in particular, but about the earlier comments.
Any other comments about this item?
Yeah, just a general sort of question for Sean probably is, how effective are these trail closed signs? Like, do people go, that's nice, and they like walk right over it? Or, I mean, when I've seen, attempts to close social trails, signs, unless the sign is really big, it doesn't really slow people down. I've seen stacks of wood, that tend to, I think, make more of a natural barrier. But is this just a notice to give people a warm up to the fact that trail, if that's their favorite trail, is going to be going away? Or is it effectively reducing traffic that helps the trail begin to heal a little bit and set it up for repair, for restoration?
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of that second point that you made where this was our first step in trying to just inform people that we are closing these social trails down and inform them of where that primary route is and where they should stay. And then as we move into actually decommissioning some of these, we'll be going forth with some of those more active trail restoration activities, like actually bringing material from the sides into the trail corridor so it doesn't look like a trail as much anymore.
Okay.
But also this will be kind of combined with increasing our ranger patrols out there as well to inform and educate people about that.
Maybe it's time to get a pet honey badger too.
Yeah.
To enforce the trail.
Okay. Going Gone. Okay, I think that's it for that item, but Director Russell?
Yeah, a couple of things that hit me in the young lady that spoke earlier about the problems with speeding bikes. I realize we can't really get into this, but I'd like to throw it out for conversation at a different time, which is, should we be looking at some enforcement on these bikes while we are in the interim of deciding what we're going to do about the e-bikes? It looks like they're here and we need to think about that. The second thing is, should we be looking at a quota or some limitation of, let's say, the first 5,000 people on the watershed, or the first 3,000 or 1,000? I don't know what the number is, but to say, or cut off entry at 11 o'clock or something like that, and try to limit the activity to try to meet, because we are what we are, and we might as well face the idea that we've got to think about flow control.
Yeah, this was, as you characterized, a non-agenda item, so we won't really get into it.
Yeah, of course.
But I would just note, Director Russell, that some of those ideas, kind of big ideas for us, that change the way people utilize the watershed and access and those sorts of things, are anticipated for us to explore as part of the watershed recreation plan that we've talked to the board about, and we'll be talking more over time about, to really take that holistic view and think about our historical practices, and are they aligned with the current population that visits the watershed, and how do we enhance those activities in a safe way.
That's great. I just think we might need to think about a little bit shorter term.
Sure.
I would presume if things go as well as they could by summer, we're looking at a different environment in terms of the usage that is opening up and things like that. So we don't have so much need, but I don't know. So anyway, that's a thought.
Okay.
Maybe we could coordinate with one TAM too. That's one thing I've thought of,
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay, have we exhausted that item? Okay, so do we have item 4?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So coming up on item 4 as part of our biodiversity fire fuels integrated plan that was adopted by the board last year. We have quite a few different professional services contracts for monitoring and mitigation associated with vegetation management work. And so this is one of them, and I'll pass it on to Carl Sanders to present.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carl Sanders, Natural Resources Program Manager. Can everyone hear me okay?
You're good.
Excellent. This is a recommendation. It's to review and refer to the board with recommendation to approve, authorizing the general manager to execute an agreement for our annual, so it'll actually be a 2-year grassland invasive plant and habitat restoration professional services contract in the amount of $150,000 that we'd like to award to WRA, a local consulting firm. The district requires, as Crystal was mentioning, district requires these professional consulting services, in this case for grassland invasive plant management and habitat restoration services for priority sites on Mount Tamalpais. Specifically, we seek support in maintaining and increasing our native plant cover in multiple grassland sites where invasive grassland species are threatening those rare plant populations. The work will include development of annual work plans, weed mapping, rare plant species avoidance, data management, initial as well as follow-up manual controls for 2 years, again emphasizing manual control. And as mentioned earlier, in October 2019, the board adopted our Biodiversity Fire and Fuels Integrated Plan, which describes 27 different management actions needed to fulfill the goals within the plan. Key to this particular contract is the management of invasive species, and this management is continuously done throughout the year with the goal of reducing fuel loads and increasing our biological diversity. This particular professional services contract will allow us to scale up vegetation management as it relates to invasive weeds, again within grassland restoration zones on Mount Tam. This is an active weed management program focused primarily on broom, yellow star thistle, but we've begun scaling it up with our BIFIP and working on other species that threaten the integrity of our high quality grasslands. The goal of this work involves target invasive weeds on priority Mount Tamalpais watershed sites, and especially those that have rare plants. The consultant will identify, map, monitor, and use non-chemical means to treat these species, especially again in areas with rare plant species. This type of contract requires advanced plant identification skills, mapping abilities, data management capacity, and restoration expertise that is beyond the capacity of our current vegetation contractors. As such, we've issued a request. We issued a request for a proposal from 4 different local firms. So we received 2 proposals back, one from WRA, the second from Hanford. After careful review with our new senior ecologist, we decided to go with WRA for their expertise and their project management approach, specifically that they would have 2 qualified botanists in the field and that they had an existing proven track record with us. Staff requests that the committee review and refer to the board with recommendation for approval to authorize the general manager to execute an agreement for our grassland habitat restoration services contract in the amount of $150,000 over the course of 3 fiscal years. As mentioned before, we sent it out to 4 firms. We received back 2 proposals, and of those 2, WRA was the best fit for our needs. Staff anticipates this will be a multi-year agreement with approximately $75,000 used annually for each fiscal year over a 2-year period, not to exceed $150,000. And we've identified funds, existing funds within 2 watershed fund centers, 6750, which is maintenance, and 6740, which is vegetation, both of which would be operational to fund this professional services contract. Any questions?
So Carl, are they actually going to come in and do the mitigation, or are they just mapping?
No, they will do manual. They will do some amount of manual removal. It's much more targeted and very selective, as opposed to maybe the more coarse work conducted by some of our other contractors where they're doing large scale fuel maintenance or large scale forest resilience work. This takes an exacting eye and knowledge of native plants and invasive grasslands, and being able to identify between the two to carefully remove them.
Of course, if they make a mistake, who knows? Huh?
No, we're watching carefully.
Are they going to be training any of our people? Or any of our people?
Not in a direct way. We will work with them, and as such, we gain quite a bit of knowledge. I mean, just from their professional expertise. They use CalFlora, which is an app-based data management system for both invasive and native rare plants. And with that, increases our own knowledge of what we have out there.
So is this going to be forever, or are we going to eventually take over?
On the weed management for the grasslands?
Just what you're doing, that kind of identification type of work.
It's, weeds are with us. Invasive plants are under management, and we can definitely keep them in check and in control. Extirpating, especially grassland species, which are noxious and really hard to eradicate. It'll be with us for a long time, and the mapping is useful because we can do trends with it as well to see if we're changing or making headway.
Carl, I believe, and Sean can clarify, that the value of this contract is twofold. One is the expertise they bring. The other is the additional resources to do the work. So because it's both, this is likely to be an ongoing, but Sean, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, let me clarify. This contract is really working in tandem with the Early Detection Rapid Response program. So, this is where this collaboration is really powerful, and that the Early Detection Rapid Response team from the OneTAM group goes out and identifies some of these invasive plants on our watershed, and they will actually remove some of those small isolated patches. But when it's more of a larger population, they hand that data over to us, and we go out and manage those populations using a contractor. So this is something we would be continuing for multiple years under the BIFIP. And to be very clear, our senior ecologist is providing that high level oversight and technical identification of all of these plants on the watershed. This contractor is working under the direction of the senior ecologist and the others on that Early Detection Rapid Response team that's part of the Conservancy.
So do we have CalFlora app? Is that something we use?
Exactly. So CalFlora is a large GIS-based database that's used across the state, and a lot of different organizations have supported the development of it. And so there's a lot of metadata behind the scenes that informs us about the species of plants and a lot of pre-packaged components of the mapping. And it provides a robust data set that's not just useful to us, but also to the broader weed community that maybe is looking at statewide weed issues. So the CalFlora information, the way that we're able to report out on an annual basis about acres treated for any of our vegetation management actions is because we're mapping everything in CalFlora.
Wow.
And then we have kind of a behind the scenes private account as in NWD, where we actually map some of our rare and more sensitive species as well, but that's just information for our internal use.
And so are these guys out there on foot, or I shouldn't say guys, are these staff out there on foot, consultants?
Exactly.
Yes, yeah, they're accessing a site first, usually by vehicle, and then they're hiking in to many of the meadows that you're probably familiar with along Ridgecrest, Potrero, Laurel Dell, even sites along Bolinas Fairfax Road that are on our property, Azalea Hill,
and
most of our grasslands.
Yeah, and just in regards to this type of work, we have to remember that it is really meticulous work, and that these are people, scouring some of these really sensitive habitats that we have on the watershed in a really detailed way, looking for some very specific species and removing those manually. So, we're going out at different times of the year to remove star thistle from some of these meadows and grasslands, and it's very tedious work and time consuming, because you do literally have to walk every inch of that ground where we know it's been before and resurvey it and try to manage it to get an effective control of some of these species.
Wow.
Sean, is there a monitoring component of this over time to just look at the efficacy of it? I mean, there's a lot of ways to try to get at exotics, and I don't pretend to be an expert in it, but are we tracking the effectiveness of this as a methodology for controlling? And I know each weed species has a different strategy for control, but are we tracking the information so that we can see how effective it is over time?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been able to document, some of our management strategies in regards to yellow star thistle and how we've been able to reduce it in some of our meadows. But as I mentioned in the OneTAM annual work plan and the annual report, OneTAM developed an early detection beyond boundaries report this last year. And that really brought all of this data together from all these different land management agencies about these specific species that are being managed, and is looking at those trends and those, documenting the reduction of populations and patches or the expansion in some cases. And we are very fortunate that they're doing this on these other land management agencies that are our neighboring properties, because we all know that invasives sometimes are transported by some of our visitors through these different lands. And so we're really trying to get ahead of that. And that's the power of this kind of cross-jurisdictional collaboration.
Great.
Okay. I'll make a motion to forward it to the board if we're done discussing.
Okay.
Second.
I don't see any public comments either.
Okay.
I can second.
This
So
says approval. Is this an approval item?
it,
It's
I thought
a
it said forward for approval.
yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
refer.
review and
yeah,
refer for approval.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay.
yeah.
That's
Okay,
right.
so we're done with that. And that brings us to the end of another meeting. And anything else?
I'm sorry. I think Roger Roberts is wants to say something. Is your hand was up, sir? Do you want to speak or are you? Yep, he wants to speak. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. All right,
Can you
sir.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Unclear.
Carl, what about cheatgrass? Because that is becoming a serious problem all across the state.
Yes, Roger, that is one of the many species that we have identified and is a priority species within our grasslands that we map and treat every year.
Thank you.
No, I have no more speakers.
Okay. Okay, I think we can adjourn if nobody has anything further. Let's adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay,
thank
thank
you
you.
all.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.